Daniel Cole stood on his porch and watched the sunset paint the sky orange and purple over New Haven Colony. His daughter Sophie sat on the wooden steps, reading a book about Earth's ancient oceans. She was 12 years old, with her mother's dark hair and his stubborn chin. Behind them, Emma hummed a soft song while preparing dinner. For 2,000 years, humanity had lived like this, peaceful, quiet, happy. Daniel had served as an ambassador for 30 years before retiring to this border colony. He had negotiated trade agreements and resolved minor disputes between species. The galaxy saw humans as gentle farmers and clever merchants. They were known for their good food, their strange music, and their tendency to adopt pets from every world they visited. Nobody remembered what humans used to be. Nobody except the humans themselves, and they had chosen to forget. The first sign of trouble came as a distant rumble in the sky. Sophie looked up from her book. 3 massive ships broke through the clouds, blocking out the fading sunlight. They were Council Enforcer vessels, each one large enough to carry 1,000 soldiers. Daniel felt something cold settle in his stomach. Enforcers never came to human worlds. There was never any need. "Emma," he called, keeping his voice calm. "Take Sophie inside." "Dad, what's happening?" Sophie asked. Before he could answer, the ships began landing in the colony's central square. Hatches opened and Zervani soldiers poured out. They were insectoid creatures, standing 7 feet tall with 4 arms and hard black shells. Their eyes reflected no light and showed no emotion. A broadcast echoed across the colony. By order of the Galactic Council, Resolution 7742 is now in effect. All human children between ages 6 and 14 are to be collected for integration into Zervani neural networks. Resistance will be met with force. This is for the greater good of galactic civilization. Daniel's blood turned to ice. He ran inside and found Emma holding Sophie tight. His wife's face was pale, but her eyes were steady. She had been a teacher for 20 years. She had helped raise hundreds of children on this colony. She understood immediately what was happening. "The basement," Emma whispered. "The old shelter." They moved quickly and quietly. Other families were doing the same across the colony. Parents grabbed their children and ran for hiding spots, for ships, for anywhere that might offer safety. It was not enough that the Zervani had scanners that could detect human life signs through walls and floors. They moved through the colony with terrible efficiency, breaking down doors and dragging screaming children from their parents' arms. Daniel heard his neighbor begging. He heard children crying. He heard the sound of bodies hitting the ground when parents tried to fight back. The basement door exploded inward. 4 Zervani soldiers filled the doorway. Daniel stepped in front of his family, knowing it was hopeless, knowing he had no weapons, knowing he would die trying anyway. "Dad." "No," Sophie said. One soldier grabbed Daniel and threw him against the wall. Another seized Emma when she tried to scratch at their eyes. The third and fourth took hold of Sophie. "Please," Daniel gasped, blood running from his forehead. "Please, she's just a child. Take me instead. Take anything else, please." The Zervani did not respond. They did not negotiate. They simply took Sophie and carried her toward the door. "Dad!" Sophie screamed, reaching for him. "Daddy, help me!" Daniel tried to stand. A Zervani boot pressed him back down. He watched his daughter disappear through the doorway, her screams echoing down the hall, growing fainter and fainter until they were gone. Emma crawled to him, and they held each other on the cold basement floor while their world ended. Across 17 human colonies, the same scene repeated 4,000 times. 4,000 children torn from their families. 4,000 mothers and fathers left broken and empty. 4,000 small voices crying out for help that never came. The Galactic Council expected humans to accept this. Other species had accepted worse. The Veln had given up half their population to serve as workers. The Kreth had surrendered their homeworld without a fight. This was simply how the galaxy worked. The strong took from the weak, and the weak learned to live with lost. Ambassador Sam Harris stood before the council chamber on the capital world. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had spent 40 years building bridges between humanity and the galaxy. He had believed in peace and cooperation and mutual respect. He looked at High Counselor Vester, the Zervani leader who had proposed Resolution 7742. Vexter sat on his throne of black metal, surrounded by representatives from a dozen species. They all watched the human ambassador with mild curiosity, waiting for the expected response. Protests, please, perhaps. Some tears. Sam Harris said nothing. He simply turned and walked out of the chamber. Behind him, every human diplomat in council space did the same. They boarded their ships and left. Within 6 hours, there was not a single human representative anywhere in the galaxy. The council laughed nervously. Surely the humans would return. Surely they would negotiate. What else could they do? Deep beneath Earth's surface, in bunkers sealed for 2,000 years, ancient systems detected the departure of the last human diplomat. Warning lights that had never been activated began to flash. Vault doors that had been designed to stay closed forever began to unlock. General Chris Webb received the alert on his personal communicator. He was 90 years old, officially retired, spending his days tending a small garden. His family had kept a secret for 2,000 years, passed down from parent to child. A sacred duty that he never expected to fulfill. He made 3 calls, across Earth and the hidden colonies. Others received the same message. They were doctors and teachers and farmers now. But their ancestors had been something else, and they had never truly forgotten. In shipyards hidden inside asteroid belts, lights flickered on for the first time in centuries. Machines began to move. Metal screamed as ancient construction bays came back to life. On New Haven, Daniel Cole held his wife and made a silent promise to his daughter. I will find you. I will bring you home. And anyone who stands in my way will learn why humanity chose peace, not because they were weak, because they remembered what they were capable of when they were angry. 3 weeks passed, and human space went completely dark. No trade ships left human ports. No communications answered council frequencies. No diplomats responded to urgent messages. The borders of human territory became a wall of silence that stretched across 100 star systems. High Counselor Vexter was not concerned. He had seen other species react this way before. They would sulk and grieve, and then they would accept reality. Humans were soft creatures, after all. They wrote poetry and grew flowers and cried at sad stories. What could such beings do against the might of the Galactic Council? He sent a peacekeeping fleet of 50 ships to check on the human colonies. Their orders were simple. Remind the humans of their place. Ensure there would be no further resistance. Report back within 10 days. The fleet never reported back. Commander Kate Miller stood on the bridge of the Starship Horizon and watched the peacekeeping fleet drift through space. Their engines were dead. Their weapons were disabled. Their crews were alive, but trapped inside ships that would never fly again. A single human vessel had done this. 1 ship against 50, and the battle had lasted less than an hour. Kate was 28 years old. She had grown up believing she would spend her life as a transport pilot, moving cargo between peaceful worlds. Her grandmother had told her stories about the old days, about ships that could crack planets and weapons that could burn stars. Kate had thought they were just stories. They were not stories. The Horizon's weapons had not been designed in the last 2,000 years. They had been preserved, hidden, waiting for a day that everyone hoped would never come. The ship itself had been built in secret, one of thousands constructed in hidden shipyards that the galaxy never knew existed. Captain Ryan Pierce stood beside her, watching the defeated fleet with cold eyes. He was a quiet man who smiled rarely and spoke even less. His family had commanded warships when humans still fought among themselves. That knowledge had been passed down through generations, kept alive in secret training facilities on asteroids and moons. "Send the message," he said. Kate opened the channel that would broadcast across the entire galaxy. Ryan's voice was calm and steady as he spoke. "This is Captain Ryan Pierce of the Human Defense Force. You took our children. You have 30 standard days to return them unharmed. If you fail to do this, you will learn why the galaxy once trembled at the name human." He paused and looked at the drifting council ships. "The fleet we have just disabled is our first message. We let them live as a gesture of good faith. Do not mistake mercy for weakness. You have 30 days. On the council capital world, Elder Zincora watched the broadcast with growing horror. He was ancient, even by the standards of his long-lived species. He remembered things that others had forgotten. He remembered warnings that had been sealed away and buried. He ran to the deepest archives of the council library, to vaults that had not been opened in 2,000 years. The seals broke under his trembling fingers, and he pulled out files covered in dust and age. The records told a terrible story. 2,000 years ago, humanity had not been pacified. They had not been conquered or broken or forced into submission. They had been begged to stop fighting. The galaxy had united against humans once before. 12 species had combined their fleets, gathering the largest military force in history. They had expected an easy victory against a young species from a small blue world. The war had lasted 3 days. When it was over, half of those 12 species no longer existed. The rest had surrendered unconditionally. They had pleaded with humanity to show mercy, to spare what remained of their civilizations, to please stop burning their worlds to Ashdod, and the humans had stopped. Not because they were defeated, not because they were tired. They stopped because a human leader named Maria Santos had looked at the destruction and felt shame. She had gathered her generals and admirals and asked a simple question: "Is this who we want to be?" The answer had been no. Humanity had chosen peace. They had put away their weapons and sealed their warships. They had helped rebuild the worlds they had shattered. They had become farmers and poets and merchants, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. The original council had agreed to bury all records of human military power. They sealed the archives and swore never to speak of what they had seen. Over centuries, the truth became legend. Legend became myth. Myth became forgotten until now. Elder Zincora brought the records to High Counselor Vexter. His hand shook as he explained what he had found. Vexter laughed. Ancient history meant nothing. Humans had gone soft after 2,000 years of peace. Their warriors were dead, and their weapons were rusted relics. He ordered the assembly of the largest fleet the galaxy had ever seen. 40,000 ships from 12 species would crush humanity's rebellion before it could begin in the hidden shipyards. General Chris Webb reviewed the production reports. 10,000 warships were already operational. 20,000 more would be ready within the month. Each one carried weapons that the galaxy had never seen. Technology that humans had continued to develop in secret for 2 millennia. Commander Kate Miller visited him in his command center. She had a question that had been bothering her since the day she learned the truth about her heritage. "Why did we keep the secret?" she asked. "Why pretend to be weak?" General Webb looked at her with eyes that had seen too much history. "Because peace is precious," he said. "Because our ancestors hoped we would never need to fight again. They wanted us to be farmers and poets. They wanted us to build instead of destroy." He turned back to the holographic display showing human space. "But they also knew that some evils cannot be answered with kindness. Some threats require teeth. So they made sure we would remember how to bite. Kate nodded slowly. And now? Now we remind the galaxy why they feared us. Now we bring our children home. And then, if we are wise, we put the weapons away again and return to our gardens. In the depths of Council space, the 40,000 ships of the combined fleet gathered for war. Their commanders were confident. Their soldiers were eager. They had never lost a major battle in 500 years. Behind them, hidden in the darkness between stars, 10,000 human warships waited in perfect silence. The 30 days were almost over. The 30 days ended at midnight, Galactic Standard Time. High Counselor Vexter sat on his throne and waited for reports of human surrender. His fleet of 40,000 ships had positioned itself at the Nexus Crossroads, the most important strategic point in Council space. 12 species had contributed their finest vessels. Their commanders had promised swift victory. The humans sent no diplomats. They offered no surrender. They simply appeared. 10,000 human warships emerged from hyperspace in a perfect sphere around the Council fleet. They moved with impossible coordination, each vessel knowing exactly where to be without any visible communication. The formation was beautiful and terrible. Like a flower made of steel and fire, Admiral Lisa Grant commanded the human forces from the bridge of the flagship Unity. She had spent her entire career leading ceremonial parades and peaceful escorts. She had never fired a weapon in anger. But her grandmother had been one of the last great admirals, and Lisa had memorized every lesson passed down through the family. She studied the Council fleet with calm eyes. 40,000 ships crewed by soldiers who had never faced a real enemy. They fought species that surrendered before the first shot was fired. They had forgotten what war actually meant. "All vessels," she said quietly, "begin." The battle lasted 6 hours. Later historians would call it the most one-sided military engagement in galactic history. Human weapons passed through Council shields as if they did not exist. Human ships moved faster than Council sensors could track. Human tactics used three-dimensional space in ways that Council commanders had never imagined. The Council fleet tried to fight back. Their weapons found nothing but empty space where human ships had been moments before. Their formations broke apart as human vessels cut through them like knives through water. Their communications dissolved into screaming chaos, but the humans did not destroy them. Ship after ship was disabled, not killed. Engines were precisely targeted, leaving crews alive but unable to move. Weapon systems were burned out with surgical accuracy. Life support was always spared. When the battle ended, 40,000 Council ships drifted helplessly in space. Not one had escaped. Not one human vessel had been seriously damaged. And despite everything, fewer than 100 Council soldiers had died. Admiral Lisa Grant opened a channel to the defeated fleet. "Your ships will be recovered by rescue vessels within 3 days," she said. "Your wounded will receive medical care. Your crews will be returned to their homeworlds unharmed. We are not here to slaughter you. We are here to bring our children home." High Counselor Vexter received the news in stunned silence. His greatest fleet had been swept away like dust. Yet somehow, impossibly, almost everyone was still alive. Chancellor Kevin Shaw appeared on every screen in Council space. He was a thin man with white hair and glasses, looking more like a grandfather than a wartime leader. His voice was soft but carried across a million worlds. "We do not want your lives," he said. "We do not want your worlds. We do not want your surrender. We want our 4,000 children returned safely. Every day you delay, we will take one of your planets. Not destroy. Take. We will remove every military installation, every government building, every symbol of Council authority. We will leave your people alive but free from your control." He paused and looked directly into the camera. You have seen what our warships can do. You have seen how we fight. Now understand this. We are holding back. We could end your civilizations in a week. We choose not to. Do not test the limits of our mercy. Return our children. Amy Pierce led the rescue team into Zervani space. She was Ryan's sister. But where he was quiet and cold, she was fire and fury. Her team consisted of 12 soldiers, each one trained in techniques that had not been used for 2,000 years. They moved through Council territory like ghosts, invisible to every sensor and scanner. Their mission was simple. Find the children. Report their location. Prepare for extraction. The search took 3 days. Council security was laughably easy to bypass. Amy's team moved from world to world, gathering intelligence, tracking prisoner transports, following the trail of 4,000 missing children. They found their answer on Zervani Prime, the homeworld of Vex, their species. The children were being held in an integration facility beneath the capital city. It was a massive complex designed to connect organic minds to the Zervani hive network. The process would erase individual consciousness and turn human children into biological processors for alien thoughts. Amy sent her report to Admiral Grant. The message was received, decoded and delivered to Chancellor Shaw within the hour. How long before they begin the integration? Shaw asked. Unknown, Amy replied through the secure channel. But Vexter knows we're coming. He may speed up the timeline. Shaw nodded slowly. Can you get the children out? Not without support. The facility is heavily guarded. We need the fleet. There was silence on the line. Everyone understood what this meant. Attacking Zervani Prime would mean war without limits. There would be no more careful restraint, no more surgical strikes. Understood, Shaw said finally. Hold your position. The fleet is on its way. Daniel Cole stood in the briefing room of the warship Defiance. He had enlisted the day after Sophie was taken. At 52 years old, he was not the fastest or the strongest soldier, but he had learned to fight with a desperate fury that frightened even the veteran warriors. Commander Kate Miller approached him after the briefing. You should stay on the ship, she said. You're a diplomat, not a soldier. Daniel looked at her with hollow eyes. My daughter is in that facility. I'm going down there if I have to swim through fire. Kate studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Stay with me, she said. Follow orders. And when we find her, you can be the first one through the door. Above Zervani Prime, the human fleet gathered like a storm about to break. 10,000 warships blocked out the stars. Their weapons hummed with power that could crack the planet in half. Vexthor watched from his palace and finally began to feel afraid. He issued one final order. If human forces landed, the integration process would begin immediately. If he could not have the human children as processors, no one would have them at all. On the surface, Amy Pierce received the intelligence about Vexthor's order. She looked at her team and spoke quietly. New mission. We're not waiting for the fleet. We're going in now. We buy time until the cavalry arrives. They checked their weapons and moved toward the facility. The final battle was about to begin. Sophie Cole had not cried since the third day. She sat in the corner of the holding cell with 15 younger children pressed close around her. They were the smallest ones, ages 6 and 7, too young to understand what was happening but old enough to be terrified. Sophie had made herself their protector. She told them stories about Earth and taught them songs and promised them that help was coming. My dad is looking for me, she told a little boy named Tommy who would not stop shaking. He won't give up. He never gives up on anything. That's what humans do. We don't quit. The other children listened. Some of them had stopped believing their parents would come. The Zervani guards told them every day that humans were weak and cowardly. They said no one was coming. They said the children would soon become part of something greater, their small minds absorbed into the vast Zorvani network. Sophie refused to believe it. Her father had always kept his promises. He would find her. In the meantime, she did what she could. She organized the older children into groups. They took turns watching the guards and learning their routines. They found small ways to cause trouble. A stolen tool here, a broken wire there. Nothing dramatic, but enough to slow down the preparations for the integration process. The Zorvani did not suspect them. How could children be a threat? Deep beneath the palace, Queen Mother Zix finally awakened from her long sleep. She was ancient beyond measure, the true ruler of the Zorvani species. High Councilor Vexter was merely her voice to the outside galaxy. A puppet she had allowed to manage small affairs while she dreamed her centuries-long dreams. But the vibrations of war had disturbed her rest. She rose from her chamber of silk and darkness and demanded to know what her servant had done. When she learned the truth, her fury shook the walls. "You took their children," she hissed at Vexter. "You took human children. Do you know nothing of history? Do you not remember the burning?" Vexter stood his ground. "Those records are sealed. The humans are soft now. They grow flowers and write poems because they chose to." Queen Mother Zix moved closer, her ancient body creaking with each step. They were never defeated. They were never broken. They stopped because they wanted to stop. And you have given them a reason to remember what they were. She turned away from him in disgust. The integration was never approved. This was your personal project, your attempt to gain power by exploiting human neural adaptability. You have doomed us all for your ambition. Above the planet, the human fleet had completely surrounded Zorvani Prime. 10,000 warships formed a sphere of steel and fire that blocked out the stars. Nothing could leave the planet. Nothing could enter. The Zorvani homeworld was trapped. Amy Pierce and her team moved through the tunnels beneath the integration facility. A Zorvani officer named Sub-Commander Dex had provided them with maps. He was different from the others, a defect in the Hive network who could think for himself and feel his own emotions. The suffering of the human children had awakened something in him that his people had tried to suppress. "The main holding area is ahead," Dex whispered. 400 guards. The children are in cells on the lower level. Amy nodded. "How long until the integration begins?" "Vexter has ordered it to start within the hour. He knows your fleet is coming. He would rather destroy the children's minds than give them back." Corporal Nate Brooks checked his weapon. He was the youngest member of the team, barely 20 years old. His little brother was somewhere in this facility. He had not seen him in 6 weeks. "Then we don't have an hour," Nate said. "We go now." They moved like shadows through the tunnels. On the surface, the first human dropships began their descent. Daniel Cole stood with Commander Kate Miller in the lead vessel. Through the window, he could see the Zorvani capital city growing larger. Somewhere down there, his daughter was waiting. "Remember the plan," Kate said. "We hit the facility from 3 directions. Ground forces draw the guards away from the holding cells. Rescue teams extract the children. We're in and out before they can activate the integration machines." Daniel nodded. His hands were steady on his weapon. He had practiced this moment 1,000 times in training. He would not fail. "And Vexter?" he asked. "If he surrenders, we take him alive. If he resists..." Kate paused. "Use your judgment." The dropships landed hard. Hatches exploded open. Human soldiers poured out into the streets of the capital city. The battle was chaos and fire. Zorvani defenders fought desperately to protect their homeworld. They had numbers and knowledge of the terrain, but they had never faced an enemy like this. Human soldiers moved with perfect coordination, covering each other, advancing steadily, never stopping. Kate's team reached the facility entrance within minutes. The doors were thick metal designed to withstand orbital bombardment. They held for about 10 seconds against human cutting tools. Inside, alarms screamed. Zorvani guards rushed to defensive positions. The integration technicians began the startup sequence. Desperate to complete their work before it was too late. In the holding cells, Sophie heard the explosions. She stood up and looked at the other children. Their eyes were wide with fear and hope. "They're here," she said. "I told you they would come. Now we need to stay together and stay calm. When the soldiers find us, we follow their instructions." "Understood?" 4,000 children nodded. Amy's team reached the integration chamber first. They burst through the doors and found Vexter standing at the main control console, his clawed hand hovering over the activation switch. "Stop," Amy commanded. "Step away from the console." Vexter laughed, a harsh clicking sound. "You are too late. In 30 seconds, the process begins. Your children will become part of our network. Their minds will be erased and rebuilt. They will serve the hive forever, and you will die. Perhaps, but I will have my victory." His hand moved toward the switch. Nate Brooks shot him through the wrist. The Zorvani screamed and staggered back. Amy crossed the room in 3 strides and drove him to the ground. Her team secured the console and began shutting down the integration systems. In the lower levels, Daniel's team reached the holding cells. They cut through locks and through open doors. Children rushed out, crying and laughing and screaming for their parents. Daniel surged desperately through the crowd. He pushed past soldiers and children, calling his daughter's name. "Sophie! Sophie, where are you?" And then he heard her voice. "Dad!" She was standing at the end of the corridor, surrounded by the youngest children. She had been protecting them until the very end. Daniel ran to her. He dropped his weapon and swept her into his arms and held her so tight he thought he might break. "I knew you would come," Sophie whispered into his shoulder. "I told them all. I told them humans never give up." Behind them, Nate Brooks found his little brother hiding under a bed. The boy was thin and scared, but alive. Nate sat on the floor and cried while his brother climbed into his lap. All across the facility, similar scenes repeated. Soldiers found children. Parents found their lost sons and daughters. Tears flowed freely, mixing with blood and dust. The battle was over. High Counselor Vexter was taken into custody, his wounds treated by human medics. Queen Mother Zix emerged from the palace and formally surrendered. The children were evacuated to waiting ships. Daniel carried Sophie all the way to the transport. He did not let go of her hand even after they were safe aboard the vessel. He would not let go for a very long time. 4,000 children were recovered that day. All of them alive. All of them unharmed. Humanity had come for its children, and nothing in the galaxy had been able to stop them. The trial of High Counselor Vexter lasted 3 days. He was not judged by humans. Chancellor Kevin Shaw had insisted on this. The Galactic Council would try their own criminal under their own laws. Humanity wanted justice, not vengeance. 12 species sent representatives to witness the proceedings. They watched in silence as evidence was presented. The unauthorized experiments, the illegal seizure of children, the attempted destruction of 4,000 young minds. Vexter had broken nearly every law the Council had ever written. When the verdict came, it was unanimous. Guilty on all charges. He would spend the rest of his life in a prison designed for the worst criminals in the galaxy. His name would be erased from Zorvani history. Queen Mother Zix offered formal reparations on behalf of her. Species, ships, technology, resources, whatever humanity demanded. Chancellor Shaw accepted only one thing, a promise that this would never happen again. "Keep your ships," he said to the gathered council. Keep your resources. We don't want them. We want peace. Real peace, built on respect instead of fear. He paused and looked at each representative in turn. 2,000 years ago, our ancestors chose to stop fighting. They put away their weapons and tried to become something better. They succeeded. Humanity became a species of farmers and builders and dreamers. We were happy. His voice grew harder. But you saw our gentleness as weakness. You thought you could take from us without consequence. You were wrong. We showed you our strength. Now we will show you something more important. He stepped back from the podium. We forgive you. The council chamber fell completely silent. Not because you deserve forgiveness. Not because we are naive. We forgive you because hatred is a poison that destroys the one who holds it. We choose not to carry that burden. We choose to build instead of destroy, to heal instead of harm, to look forward instead of back. Shaw's final words echoed through the chamber. But never forget what we are capable of. Never forget that mercy is a choice, not a requirement. If anyone ever threatens our children again, there will be no trial. There will be no negotiation. There will only be fire and silence. He turned and walked out of the chamber. The human delegation followed. Behind them, the representatives of 12 species sat in stunned silence. They had expected conquest. They had expected demands for tribute and territory. They had been ready to submit to human rule for the next 1,000 years. Instead, humanity had offered peace. On New Haven Colony, reconstruction was well underway. Damaged buildings were being rebuilt. New schools were opening. Families that had been scattered were coming back together. Daniel and Emma Cole sat on their rebuilt porch and watched Sophie play in the yard. She was teaching the younger neighborhood children a game she had learned from Tommy in the holding cells. They were laughing and running and acting like the children they were supposed to be. Amy Pierce visited them on a cool afternoon. She had become something of a hero after the rescue mission, though she refused all honors and medals. She just wanted to go back to her normal life. How is she? Amy asked, nodding toward Sophie. Better, Daniel said. She still has nightmares sometimes, but she's strong. Stronger than any of us. Emma brought out glasses of cold tea. They sat together and watched the sun set over the colony. What happens now? Amy asked. Daniel thought about the question for a long time. We rebuild, he finally said. We remember. And we try to be better than we were before. He looked at his daughter, who was now organizing the other children into teams for some complicated game. Sophie asked me if we would have to fight again someday. I told her the truth. Maybe. The galaxy is vast and full of dangers. There will always be those who see peace as weakness and kindness as opportunity. But Daniel smiled slightly. But not today. Today, we live. Today, we love. Today, we remember why peace is precious. The years passed. Sophie Cole grew into a remarkable young woman. She studied diplomacy and languages and history. She learned about the war and the rescue and the choice humanity had made afterward. She understood both the strength and the restraint that defined her species. At 25 years old, she was appointed Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council. She took the same position her father had once held, walking the same halls where Sam Harris had made his silent departure decades earlier. The galaxy had changed in the years since the war. The Council had rewritten its laws. No species could be compelled against its will. Children were declared sacred across all cultures. The strong were forbidden from preying upon the weak. These changes had not come from fear alone. They had come from watching humanity choose mercy when destruction would have been easier. They had come from seeing strength restrained by wisdom. Sophie stood in the council chamber and addressed a gathering of young diplomats from newly contacted species. They had heard stories about humanity. They wanted to know if those stories were true. A young delegate from a species called the Verith raised her hand. Her people had only recently achieved space travel. They were still learning about the galaxy's history. "Ambassador Cole," she said, "is it true that your species defeated the entire Galactic Council to save 4,000 children?" Sophie smiled. She remembered being one of those children. She remembered the fear and the hope and her father's arms around her. "Yes," she said. "It's true." The young delegate leaned forward. "But you could have conquered everything. You could have ruled the galaxy. Why did you stop?" Sophie looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, her parents were probably sitting on their porch, watching the sunset, enjoying the peace they had helped create. "We would have burned the universe down for one child," she said softly. "Every star, every world, everything that exists. We would have destroyed it all without hesitation." The young delegate's eyes went wide. Sophie turned back to her with a gentle expression. "Destroying is easy. Any species with enough weapons can destroy. But building is hard. Creating peace is hard. Raising children and growing gardens and writing poetry and learning to forgive your enemies, these things are hard." She paused. "Our ancestors learned this lesson through centuries of war. They nearly destroyed themselves before they understood. And when they finally chose peace, they meant it. Not because they were weak, because they had grown wise." The young delegate sat in thoughtful silence. "So that is what humanity offers the galaxy," Sophie continued. "Not conquest, not empire. A different way. A path towards something better. The choice is yours to make." She gathered her materials and prepared to leave. "But remember this. We will always defend those who cannot defend themselves. We will always protect the innocent. And if anyone ever threatens the children of any species, they will find humanity standing in their way." She smiled one last time. "We're very stubborn about that sort of thing." She walked out of the chamber, leaving the young diplomats to consider her words. Behind her, the galaxy stretched out in endless possibility. Billions of worlds, trillions of lives, an infinite future waiting to be written. Humanity had helped build this peace. They would help it endure. And somewhere in the rebuilt colony of New Haven, Daniel Cole sat on his porch with his wife and watched their grandchildren play in the yard. The universe was quiet. The stars were bright. And for now, at least, all was well.